So welcome back to the series of videos looking to prepare you for your internal assessment. Now, after spending the first three videos looking more at the theory of research and also introducing your internal assessment, we're now going to be looking at more specific parts. So we're going to start by looking at how to determine your area of research. So hopefully by the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the different parts involved in referencing a source, and you should be able to properly reference different types of sources. So as always, here are my references. So in this instance, we have one book, two websites, and a series of online videos. So how do you go about determining what you actually want to do your internal assessment on? Now this really depends on the person. Perhaps you already have an area of interest that you want to explore. Perhaps we've done a lesson where you thought, oh, that could be an interesting area, and you want to look into it further. Or if this hasn't happened to you yet, then I'm afraid you're going to need to look around, to read around different chemistry areas till you find something that interests you. Now, notice I've used the word interest in all three of these bullet points. That's because it is important that you have some sort of interest in the topic. This links into the personal engagement section of the marking scheme. So whichever way you came across the area of research, you have to say how you came across it. All three of these are fine as long as you can show that you have a genuine interest in that area. And it'll also make the process a bit more enjoyable if you actually have a genuine interest. Now, regardless of how you came across your area of research, you are going to have to do some sort of literature review. Now, the literature review itself for the internal assessment will not be as involved, as detailed as it would be for if you were doing an extended essay in chemistry, or that you will need to do when you go on to university. But it is still important you can do it and do it properly, and this is going to be the main focus of this lesson, looking at how to do your literature review. So what's the point of literature review? You are probably going to need some background knowledge about your area of research. You're not going to be doing an area of chemistry which is brand new, not in a school laboratory. So it's going to be based on something with background information. So you're going to need to read around that area to get information on what has already been done. Now this information could be used to hone, to focus your research question. It could be that you come across an area which hasn't yet been researched, or perhaps they attempted but there was problems and you're going to come up with a way of doing it properly or improving upon the method. You might learn about problems that have been previously encountered. Someone else might have tried an experiment and there was a problem with it. This means that you should write this in your information and you should develop your method factoring in that problem, doing it differently. And you could also find recommendations for future research. Now, you could potentially try and do some of that future research. Or it can help you with the last part of your report, where you have to come up with different ways to progress your research and give future areas that need to be looked at. So how you go about your literature review, again, is quite a personal thing. It depends on how you prefer to do it. Now, you may not have done something like this before, but you certainly will do at university, so it's helpful to be able to develop a method which works for you. Now, there are four basic sections. Obviously, you first need to search. This could be books, websites, research journals, although that is more likely to be at university. Now, from this search, you need to identify the resources which are of use to you. You obviously need to read them and analyze them. And this middle section goes back and forth. You read it, it may be useful, it may not, it may help you to identify other useful papers. So this goes back and forth. Then once you've analysed them, you go and you put it all together and you synthesize your own report. Now, how you go about doing this, as I was saying, depends on you. Some people like to print off the sources and highlight them, possibly using different colour highlighters for different chapters, different areas. Some people like to actually write or type the direct parts of the resource and then sort of put it together into their report. You can do it handwritten and type it up. You can do it directly on the computer straight away. There isn't one way of doing this, and you just have to develop a way that works for you. Now, as you're going through your literature review, it is very important that you develop the skill of referencing. Now, referencing is a very important part of the scientific process. It allows us to build on previous work whilst giving credit to the person who did the work for that information. If you give an opinion or a fact which has been developed by someone else and you don't reference them, you're basically stealing credit. It's a form of intellectual theft. So obviously, morally, it is wrong. But also personally, if you don't learn to reference properly for your IB, it can be dealt with harshly. And then when you get to university, you can be failed for not referencing properly. But obviously that isn't going to happen because we're going to go through how to do it now, and you're going to make sure your report is properly referenced. Now, there are lots of referencing systems around. There isn't necessarily one which is better than the others, as long as you are consistent and use the same system. But our school, we're expecting you to use the Harvard referencing system, which apparently doesn't actually have anything to do with Harvard. According to their own website, it's a bit of a myth. This is a very commonly used system. I actually used this system when I was at university writing my literature reviews and dissertations, and it's the one we are expecting you to use for your reports. So there are two different parts to referencing. Firstly, there are your in-text citations, and secondly, there is your reference list, which goes at the end of your report. Now, there are lots of rules governing both of these parts of the referencing system, and you're not expected to know them all off by heart, but there are plenty of resources you can use, and you have to use them to be able to do your references properly. Now, with your in-text citations, the two types you will commonly use are what is known as direct citations or indirect. Now, if we just look at the two of these, now direct is if you are quoting something directly from your source. So you can see here that the quote, whatever you are taking directly from the resource, needs to be in quotation marks. Then your citation includes the surname of the author, the year that your resource is from, then if it's a document, the actual page number. So you can put the whole thing at the end of the quotation in rounded brackets, or you can break it up slightly. Now here, as the author states, you've put the year in brackets next to the author's name. The page number goes in brackets at the end of the actual quote. So these will both be examples of direct citations. Now with indirect, it is when you've used information gathered from someone else, from your source, but you haven't directly quoted. So again, this can be done either altogether at the end of the information, or you can break it up slightly. Now notice here there isn't a page number. When it's just the general information, it can be from over several pages or from the whole resource. It's a lot more general, so you don't put the page number. So you'll be doing these as you go along, and in your actual report there will be these in-text citations. And they're reasonably straightforward. There isn't that much information you have to include. Your reference list, however, does require a lot more information, and there's a very systematic way that you need to reference your sources. Now, as I said, you wouldn't be expected to memorize how to write a full reference for all these different sources. And there are plenty of resources out there. Now, I'm just going to suggest two, but these are definitely not the only ones available. Now I've put 2 because depending on the type of source you might have, one of these websites tells you how to reference some sources, and if you can't find it on this first one, try the second one. So let's just have a look at this first website. Now this resource is provided by the University of Sheffield, which is where I did my teacher training. So I'm pretty sure I used this website when I was doing my essays, my tasks during my training. Now I'm not going to go through all of this because there's a lot of information, but I would very much suggest that you have a good look through it. So it gives you information on creating citations in different situations, whether you're quoting or paraphrasing, secondary referencing, which is where you're referencing someone who is referencing someone else. All of this is useful information, but you can go through that in your own time. For now, I'm just going to have a look at a few specific examples of how to reference different sources. So let's have a look at a book. So you can see here you have your in-text citation. Now the actual reference. It is very important that you do this properly. Now it might seem very pedantic to you, but it's important you do it in the proper way and you remain consistent. So for a book, you have the surname of the author, comma, the initial or the initials, followed by dots. And then when you finish this, you put another comma. You then have the year in rounded brackets, followed by a full stop. You then have the title of the book in italics, followed by a full stop. The edition, if it isn't the first edition, full stop. Place of publication, colon, and then you have the publisher, full stop. Now when you are writing a reference to a book, it has to be in this order. Where it has italics, you have to put italics. Where there are dots or commas or colons, you have to put those as well. They've given an example here. So surname, comma, initial, dot, comma, year in brackets, full stop, title in italics, full stop, 5th edition in this case, full stop, the place of publication, in this case Oxford, colon, and the publisher name, Oxford University Press, full stop. You need to do this for every book you have used. Place of publication and the publisher itself can sometimes be found on the back or on the inside cover or perhaps on the first couple of pages. Just depends on the book, but it will be there. Now, if you have a book with 2 or 3 authors, when you're citing them, you need to put both of their surnames. And when you're referencing, again, both authors, all 3 authors, need to be included. Now, if you have a book with 4 more authors, obviously it's getting more and more. Now, when you have the citation, you put et al. Dot. But when you're making the reference, all of the authors need to be included. Doesn't matter how many there are. You might also need to reference web page. Now here the citation looks very similar. In this case, it's not a person, but an organization. In this case, the Met Office. Now let's look at the actual reference itself. So you have the author of the section, surname, initial just like before, or corporate author if it's an organization, dot, comma, year in rounded brackets, dot, the title of the part you are looking at, then online in square brackets, full stop, name of the website in italics, full stop, date viewed in square brackets, full stop, available from, then you put the full URL, and it needs to be of the part you are looking at, not just the homepage of the website. It needs to be the full URL of the part of the website you are looking at. It needs to be the web page that you are actually looking at within the website. So there are just a couple of common examples, but you might be using different sources. Now, as you can see here, there are loads of different examples. And they may have slightly different ways of referencing, so you need to make sure you're looking at the correct part. Now, obviously, I'm not going to go through all of these, it would take all day, but just be aware that this resource is here and you should be using this one, or if you have a different one, make sure you use it. So, like I was saying, you don't have to memorize how to do your references, but you do need to do it properly. So please use the resources available. So hopefully, you should be able to describe the different parts involved in referencing a source, in text citations, the actual reference at the end. And you should have an idea about how you should be putting your references. I'm not expecting you to memorize it, but you should be able to write a full reference with no mistakes. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.